we're caught in this debate over employee health and safety, consumer health and safety, right? And the need for the employees to be at work so that they can, get a paycheck. And this is just the employee side of things. We're not even worried about the employer side of things right now. Where have you come down in your debates on what is the right thing to do by employees?
Yeah, well, just to give you the context of figures we put out today, our estimations that we put out today is that the drop in working hours, and this is the basis of our calculations, in the second quarter of this year compared to the end of last year, is of 10.5%. People are working a total of 10.5% less than last year, and that translates into the loss of 305 million full-time jobs. And that's up from 195 million from estimates we put out just 3 weeks ago. So we're still heading downwards when it comes to the jobs impact of this pandemic, looked at the global stage. And by the way, that headline about half of the world's livelihoods being at risk is very much focusing on the informal economy, where 6 out of 10 workers actually make their living. But, if you're sitting, as I am, in Europe or perhaps in the industrialized north, we're beginning to think of our way out of this, aren't we? It's out of the survival phase into the exit phase. And there we've got this really difficult debate, I think. The public debate is, as you've indicated, very much, well, how can we continue to give the absolute priority that we must to the health issues, and I think that is a given, and then work our way back into work. I think there's some pretty basic and simple principles, which are that we shouldn't be sending people back to work. We shouldn't be getting up and running again until we can do that in conditions of full protection and guarantees for the well-being of the working people, not just in the workplace, but in transport and the rest of it, and in a way that does not run the risk of us provoking a second
So
peak.
I think we're all in agreement on there, Guy. So let me ask you then, what is the role then of the ILO, for example? So can you bridge a funding gap with employers if necessary from dues that you've collected over the years? Do you put pressure on employers to bring employees back, but to provide masks and even to have a backup of respirators should they be necessary? What are you advocating for?
Well, we're certainly not a funding organisation. That's for sure. But what we are encouraging, what we can give guidance on, are the good practices that enterprises and indeed trade unions need to be adopting as we embark upon this extremely complex process of return to work. Very easily to get out of work, much more difficult to get back. And there is a real magic ingredient, and anybody who remembers the 2008, 2009 financial crisis knows this. It is cooperation in the workplace. It is dialogue between enterprises and their workers. And we're already seeing in countries like France, where big debate in the National Assembly yesterday about the return to work, the response of the social partners. These are really difficult issues. They don't lend themselves to formulaic one-size-fits-all solutions. We need cooperation at the workplace to find the right way back, as quickly as we can, but as slowly as we need to remain safe.
Guy, as you say, the debate around reopening the economy is really gaining traction right now. Vonnie and I spoke to the CEO of 3M yesterday, and he was basically saying, look, we're struggling to keep up with demand from the healthcare sector. You start to factor in the requirements that are going to come from the enterprise sector, the corporate sector. I'm just wondering, is it your assessment that we are not ready to make this move to reopen the economy?
It's happening. Look, it's happening. I mean, we're seeing it happening. I'm sitting in Geneva. The Swiss government's just made the announcement this afternoon of the scaled-in return to work. But you don't do it at any cost and in any way. This needs really careful planning.
Okay.
I'm sitting in a building where 1,000 people normally work. There are 30 in here now. It's going to take us 2 weeks to get the building ready for people to come back safely. These are the nuts and bolts that we can't simply gloss over.
But as you say, it's happening, and the Swiss government have made that decision, and other governments are making those decisions as well around the world. My question is, what is your sense of the preparedness for that process. If you are saying that workers need to be protected, and I think we all agree upon that, and PPE needs to be provided and protocols need to be put in place, is it your sense that we are making this move too early, given the fact that the healthcare sector, and the debate is raging where I am in the UK at the moment about the availability of PPE for healthcare workers on a daily basis, that the corporate sector simply does not have the equipment necessary to protect its workforce to bring it back into work?
Yeah, I mean, I can't generalize about that. What is certainly true is that we are learning on the hoof. Nobody's done this before. We don't know about it. And so we're going to run into obstacles, we're going to run into problems. I do think it is important that we, whilst I'm not going to say we're doing it too quickly, I don't believe that to be the case, I do believe it is fundamentally important, not just from an economic point of view, but from a health point of view, that we get this right and we take the necessary time.
Yes.
Are we prepared? No, we're not, because nobody was thinking this was ever going to happen. So this is going to be long and tough and hard.
Yeah, I know, but
I think
Guy,
there's no getting around it.
You know, the ILO is funded with $800 million worth of, funding from states and from various labour organisations. And I'm still struggling to figure out what exactly your role in this is. If you're advising companies as a UN specialised part of the UN,
Yep.
what are you saying? Like, what are you saying to Amazon one thing? Are you saying to Walmart another thing? Who's listening to you, and what do your members want? Have you lobbied them? Have you asked them?
We're talking all the time to the business community, the trade union community. We're working at the country level with UN teams to work out, for example, we haven't mentioned it, the 1.6 billion people in the informal economy who probably have no means of subsistence in the next days, not the next weeks or months. We're working with those people to get social protection systems in place to make sure they can, they can survive this. We're working along supply chains to work out how the 4 million garment workers in Bangladesh whose livelihoods has been cut off by the cancellation of orders by buyers, in the north, trying to work out how they can be given the support they need to get this through. This is a massively practical response by our organization. This isn't theory, it's not abstract. We have the budget that you've mentioned, but, that goes nowhere when you look at the needs that we have. We are not a funding organization. We are working with those who are funding organizations to try to get the assistance and the guidance and the support, where it's so very, very badly needed.
Yeah.